Hey, y'all. Welcome to the next Alder Talk Live. I appreciate everybody being here. This is a show about law, about life, about the business of law and the business of life. This and other episodes are on our YouTube channel, Alder Talk. Please subscribe there for this and notifications of future episodes. Today, I want to talk about closing arguments. So, a couple of nights ago, I was at the Journey concert at Crypto. Toto was opening, and while Toto's about to finish, I get a text from a young lawyer who goes, "Mike, I'm in trial. I'm doing closing tomorrow morning. Is there any way you can call me and just give me some advice?" And I want to talk about that advice I gave to him. I said, well, let me wait till Toto's done. And between Toto and Journey, I gave him the advice that I'm going to talk about with you. Everybody thinks closing arguments are the most important thing that you need in your repertoire to be a great litigator. It's not true. It certainly helps to be good at trial, right? But understand that you're going to do, I've done 100 jury trials in my career. So you're doing 100 closing arguments over 20, 30 years. Depots you're going to do in every single case. But they are important, but I think they're very much misunderstood, right? The idea of a primacy in a trial is that, jurors are sizing you up. They're sizing your client up right away, like we all do with each other. So by the time of jury selection, many openings, jury selection, opening, the first witness, that primacy, that early part of the trial really dictates what kind of glasses the jurors are putting on to look at the rest of the case, whether their glasses are plaintiff colored or their glasses are defense colored. And you can understand that if they've got defense colored glasses on, then, that great cross of their expert probably is like, no big deal. If they've got plaintiff colored glasses on, then that cross was devastating. But understand that when you get to closing arguments, most, if not all, the jurors, in most cases, have either made up their mind or are strongly favoring and listening for what comports or is consistent with what they want to vote. So what closing argument is really understanding that after your closing and after the law is read to the jury, they're going back in a room and they're going to argue, just like the lawyers are arguing here. And you're going to have lawyers that, through primacy in the trial, are going to be looking for ammunition to help you when in deliberations, the jurors that are not helpful to you are going to raise all the points that the defense raises. And you want to, through your closing argument, talk about the evidence in the law and anticipate what those defense arguments are and give the answer to your lawyers so they can give it in deliberations. And so what I do in closing arguments is I literally explain what I'm doing, right? I explain that after we're done and the judge reads you the law, you're going to go back and pick a foreperson. You're going to go through the evidence. You're going to go through the law. And that's what I want to do with you right now. And I explain the burden of proof. And then I go through not everything, but the most important things that I think a jury is going to talk about. And I'm realistic with myself. I'm guilty of it just like everybody. By the time you're on, right at closing argument, the case that you thought that really is worth 200 grand, you think is worth 200 million, because, you convince yourself. But I try to take a step back and remember where I was when I started the case, the trial, and really think about what are the legitimate issues that the jurors are going to deal with, right? What are they going to think about, whether it be substantial factor, causation, liability issues, comparative fault. And I do not shy away from the good points that the defense had, because those are the things that are going to come up in deliberation. And I need to talk about them and give my lawyers the answer to that. or at a minimum get everyone to understand that the defense can have points too, right? What the burden of proof more likely than not means is not that there can't be any good points on the other side. It's just that there's more good points on our side than on their side. So I acknowledge when there's a good point. Yeah, the defense made a good point. That the plaintiff said this and this was different. But in the grand scheme of things, does that change the burden of proof to where they win? No. And what are the reasons maybe that happened? The plaintiff was tired. Maybe their memory was bad. People forget. Again, you're looking at giving answers to your lawyers to respond to when those things come up in deliberations. So in a closing argument, it's great if you're Barack Obama, you're JFK, you're MLK, you have all this, you're a preacher. I saw my dad as a preacher for 50 years, and I'm just still amazed at how do they come up with this all the time, That is a misnomer. You do not have to be the greatest orator in the world. You don't have to come up with quotes or memorable things to say, as long as you understand that you are communicating arguments to your lawyers so that at the end of the day of deliberations, you've satisfied the burden of proof and they've given you what you're asking for. So in a closing argument, I always, thank the jury, of course. I always talk about the burden of proof, and I explain what I'm saying and what you're going to do with this. And as I say, I go through the important evidence in the law, the important questions that I think the jury's going to have an answer to. But I want to finish with saying that no matter how you argue damages, no matter how you argue liability, right? And arguing damages and what is a whole other topic. But I want to talk about the last two things that I always try to finish with, right? That I want the jurors to remember. And again, remember I talked about acknowledging real life. So one is, especially if you have an individual defendant, especially if it's, little old granny on the other side, right? Even though we know that she's got $30 million worth of insurance coverage, right? Even if the judge has said, they read the instruction, you can't consider insurance one way or the other, et cetera, right? You have to address the elephant in the room that some people are going to go, especially if they're like a young person. Oh, this verdict in deliberations are going to say this verdict's going to ruin their lives. They're going to have to owe money for the rest of their lives. Or how are they going to pay for this? Or, yeah, this case is worth $1 million, but I'm not giving that because this poor person couldn't pay that. It's going to bankrupt them, et cetera. So usually in rebuttal, so that it's relatively fresh in their mind, maybe even in both my main closing and in rebuttal, I say, look, there may be some in deliberation, somebody brings up, hey, how is this going to affect the defendant? Hey, this is a 23-year-old college student. We can't give full value because that's going to break the bank. That person's going to go bankrupt, whatever. And whoever's a foreperson needs to say, you know what? We have been instructed that we can't consider that. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, is because if you think that your verdict's going to affect the defendant in one way or the other, we can't give you any evidence that that's true at all. We can't put on any evidence that they have insurance and this doesn't affect them in any way. In fact, the judge and the law specifically precludes us from giving you any information about that. And it's so important because I understand that sometimes it comes up in deliberations. And foreperson, whoever it is, needs to quash that. If you guys consider that in your judgment, in your verdict, it's called error. Because you have no idea, because we can't tell you anything about insurance or no insurance. Right? The second thing that I want to say is, and I always raise this, is that even though it's clear in the jury instructions that unanimity a unanimous verdict is not required in a civil case, only 9 of 12 is, that people are just programmed to all be unanimous if possible. And you need to re-emphasize, especially on damages, and again, put it on the table, that once you get to 9 of 12, you have a verdict. Because what happens, especially on damages, is that you go and they do an initial round, and you've said, you've proven your case and you've given a suggestion of $5 million, and 9 of 12 say, yeah, I think $5 million is appropriate. And they go, all right, well, how many people think, $4 million is appropriate? And 10 out of 12, 3 million, 2 million, and all 12. Okay, $12 million, right? And I know it sounds silly, but this is what happens. So they would have had a verdict at 5 million if they really understood that once they had 9 or more, they stop. Right? Unanimity, in the attempt to get unanimity, always circles the number lower. And it's so important that I say, look, you guys go back in deliberations. I mean, you've heard about criminal cases and unanimous verdicts and how that's so much better if it's unanimous. In this type of case, that does not apply, and it's not true. Your verdict is just as good 9 of 12, 10 of 12, 11 of 12, or 12 of 12. And in fact, it's a lot shorter process that once you get to 9, you have a verdict. A lot of time is spent trying to get unanimity when you don't need it once you get 9. So ladies and gentlemen, when you're back there and 9 of you agree on a fair and reasonable number, hopefully the one that I've suggested, or even more, you have a verdict. So those are the things I always talk about. Now, you see what I've done is I've been straight up. I understand what they're doing, and I'm telling them that they may be doing this stuff. I'm telling them they can't do it. It's error, because I want it to stop. So those are my points on closing arguments. I love this stuff. I'm happy to help in any way. I write about it here in the Trial Lawyer's Guidebook. If anybody wants this, if you don't have it already, please reach out to me at Alder Talk or Alder Talk Live, or my email address, cmalder@alderlaw.com. Again, please subscribe to the Alder Talk YouTube channel. This and others will be on it. And I'll see y'all the next time. Thanks very much.